All right, Ryan Case, welcome to the Think Wise podcast. We're super excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and appreciate the invite.
So on the Think Wise podcast, we're all about interviewing successful people so that young professionals can learn what it takes to be successful. But at the end of the day, everyone's got their own definition of success. So right off the bat, before we begin, to give our audience some context, what would you say is your personal definition of success?
It's a great question, and I've been thinking long and hard about it, and I think definitely you're right. Everybody's got their own definition. Mine might be similar to a lot of people. It might be totally different, but I think for me, it's really, and this is just coming from a father of three and a husband. I think it's about being happy with what you do, finding fulfillment in what you do, and being able to provide for your family. Like that's the most important. I would probably provide for your family at the top, because there's a lot of successful people that don't enjoy what they're doing, but are providing a really wonderful life for their family. But I think if you can combine all of those things together, that's pretty successful.
Yeah, I love that definition. I feel like a lot of young people think it kind of has to be one way or the other, either make a lot of money or, be happy with your family. But, to be able to combine those, I think that's a great definition.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Having done what I've done for as long as I have, I've met people that are wildly successful from a financial standpoint, big title, big paycheck, big bonus structure, big house, nice cars, and their families are falling apart and they're miserable. I've seen that a lot, specifically at like executive leadership levels. But I've also seen a lot of people that don't make a ton of money, but feel fulfilled and are providing for their families, and they're the happiest people I've ever met. So you got to kind of find that balance that works for you.
Ryan, looking at your life from my perspective and going off of your definition, I just want to let you know that I see you as a very successful person. And I think that you do great. You do great professionally. You do great personally. You have a great family. When we first met, our conversation quickly turned to you talking about your background and your history, and you were telling me a little bit about your professional career. So you're in the footwear and apparel business and have been for basically your entire adult life. Where did that passion come from?
It's a great question. It's one that I actually really enjoy answering, because I have been asked it quite a bit throughout my career. How much time do we have? I guess is my question for you. I'll try to give you the abridged answer. I think it all started back when I was a kid. Who I am today is the sum of a lot of parts, and a lot of points of inspiration and things that just really kind of drove me throughout my life. And, my path was a very unorthodox one. I kind of serpentine my way to where I am, but I'd say that, where it all started was just, I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be happy when I was older. I was just happiness was what I targeted. And a lot of that came from just a father who was very, very successful, a 38-year career at Boeing, retired an HR executive, and he hated it. He hated every second of it. And I'd see him come home and just cry and weep and, but again, he was providing for his family, provided very well for us. But, he always said, like, don't do what everybody says you have to do, do what you want to do, and I'll support you in whatever you want to do. And, that path was winding, and it was complicated, and I didn't do what most people do. But I followed my passion. And I think it was really, I tell the story of, like, my two passions growing up were playing basketball and skateboarding, which in itself was very bizarre for a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s. Like, you were either one or the other. You were not both. And, I remember going to University of Washington. It was Bob Bender's basketball camp. And I showed up with bleach blonde hair, wearing like skate shoes and stuff, and switched into my Flight 89s and went out and played ball. Was a power forward, and people just couldn't figure out who I was and why I was both of these things. And I tell the story of, when Michael Jordan was, coming up, and, the Jordan 1s were like the shoes to have, but the Powell Peralta Bones Brigade, the skateboarders in the Search for Animal Chin video, were also wearing Jordan 1s. And I just remember being like, wait, this is it. Like, these guys are wearing it and this guy's wearing it. And I just kind of fell in love with the idea of footwear and clothing and the culture around it. And that was not only was it bizarre that I was kind of all these different things and not just one in particular, because no one could define me, but I also was able to like see this red thread through things that didn't otherwise connect, and I chose to go after it. And I'll tell you, I had a lot of people growing up being like, "You want to do what? You want to make shoes? You want to make clothes?" Like, I'm from a little fisherman town called Des Moines in just south of Seattle, Washington. Like, no one there was pursuing careers in footwear. They wanted to play in the NBA, or they wanted to, be a professional snowboarder because it was a big snow community up there, but it wasn't like, make the stuff that they're wearing. So it was a very interesting path that I had to take to try to get to where I was. It wasn't like the traditional go to college, get a degree, get a job, grow. It was quite the opposite. It was find loopholes, meet people, take a job somewhere, walk away from bigger money to take a job here to hopefully work your way up. So yeah, it was kind of the like I said, it was the sum of all those parts that kind of led me to where I am now.
So culture, like all of a sudden puts a highlight on sneakers, on footwear, and you're like, okay, I get this. I want to be a part of this. And so here you are in these juxtaposed worlds, and you're interested in this. And so you said you had a non-traditional approach. So why don't you take us from that basketball camp to your first couple of jobs? Tell us about that. How did you actually get into the footwear business?
Yeah, I was always great at school. I was always straight A student, honor roll. I went from like a 3.95 down to a 3.6, and as I got a little older, got a little worse to be quite honest with you. But I was always a good student, and I grew up in a family of educators, specifically on my mother's side. My dad was a principal and a coach, and my grandmother worked for the superintendent, and all my aunts and uncles were teachers and all had their master's degrees. So I was around a pretty influential family that really put education first. And it's not to say that I took a different route because education wasn't important to me. It was more so that like traditional education just didn't appeal to me. It didn't make a boatload of sense about what I was trying to do. Because again, there was no one, saying, hey, there's a school in downtown LA called, FITM that you can go get a merchandising degree, or you can go to RISD out in Rhode Island and get a design degree. Like no one around me was telling me that. It was, go get a bachelor's degree and then get your master's and then go get a job. And I was like, but I don't want the job that comes with that. Mm-hmm. And so, those things that were influential in my life started drawing me towards this industry. And I remember my senior year of high school, I worked for Zoomies. And I remember all the kids thought it was so cool because Ryan works at Zoomies. He can get a discount. I was like, no, I can't. But it was a cool job nonetheless. And I remember there was a guy that worked there who was a rep, and he repped a snowboard company. And I was like, well, what do you mean you're a rep? He's like, yeah, I work for this. Like, I don't just work here, but I work for this snowboard brand too. I remember it was 32 snowboard boots. And he's like, and I go to stores and I sell this stuff. And I was like, that's right. That this stuff has to get here, has to get to these stores. And in order for it to get here, someone has to make it. In order for someone to make it, someone has to come up with the ideas. And I remember thinking like, well, that's my in. I got to do that. If you take a step back even further, I had already known that I wanted to make stuff. I remember those Flight 89s I talked about earlier. I remember the story goes with my mom. She always retells it better than I do, but that I had the shoes one night and we were watching a program, and I went and grabbed a washcloth and started washing them off. And then I grabbed some pens and I started coloring. She's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I don't like the way these look anymore. I want to change them. And she's like, well, why? And I was like, because I enjoy this. And she's like, what do you mean you enjoy this? I said, well, I want to make shoes when I grow up. So again, jump ahead to sitting here talking to this guy when I'm 17 years old. And I'm like, he knows somebody. He knows something that I don't know. And that was an unlock for me in my career, is I realized that there are people out there that know more than me. And it's not necessarily my dad or my grandfather or an aunt or an uncle. Like, of course they do, but they're not in tune with what it is that I wanted to do. So basically from there on out, I kind of continued my retail experiences through college. I helped a friend open a skate shop in Des Moines, and, I'd kind of jumped around here and there, kind of testing the water with some retail places. But I remember what really the big turning point for me was, I was about 3.5 years into my college experience. And I remember just being like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know what I'm doing, because everything I'm talking about in these classes is not a path that leads to what I want to do, or at least no one was telling me that it could. So I remember my father ended up kind of being like, hey, like, I'm not paying for this anymore. Like, I don't know where your head's at. I felt pretty lost, to be honest with you. I felt kind of like, man, I'm just going to be, one of those stories you hear about, hey, remember so-and-so we went to school with, he had all these aspirations and now he's selling used cars down the road. And again, there's anything wrong with that, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I got kind of confused and didn't know what to do. I ended up getting a job working in a frozen foods warehouse called Plymouth Poultry, just outside of downtown Seattle, down by Boeing Field. And I worked there for about 9 months, and I was working Sunday through Thursday, 6 a.m. shifts, freezing cold. My health was deteriorating. Doc was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm working in this, negative 10 degree freezer, unloading trucks. And I remember I was living with two of my buddies. And one of which had just graduated from the University of Washington, got a degree in construction management, working for Hoffman Construction, just killing it. Another buddy of mine was working for a radio station, just killing it. And I remember just being depressed and just like, okay, this is not what I want to do. Like, this is not the dream. And I came home from work one afternoon, and they were out back hanging out and throwing the football or something. And my buddy just saw it on my face. He's like, what's the deal? I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And he's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, you know what I want to do. I want to work in footwear. And he's like, then go work in footwear. What's the problem? Like, what's stopping you? And I started thinking back to that experience with my mom and telling her what I wanted to do and having a dream as a young child. And that interaction I had at Zoomies with the guy telling me that he was doing it. And I was like, wow, I lost that. And I got to find it again. And, to make a long story short, luckily, one of the guys I worked with, his uncle had started Geox Footwear, which was this footwear brand that had this really cool breathable technology and so on and so forth. He goes, call my uncle. I said, I don't know your uncle. He goes, who cares? Just call him. What does it matter? What do you have to lose? And I thought, wow, I have nothing to lose. I mean, worst case scenario, I just keep working at this frozen foods warehouse. So I picked up the phone and cold called him, told him who I was, had a conversation with him. And I just said, I'm not looking for you to give me anything. I'm not looking for you to hire me. I'm just looking for some advice. Like, tell me where to go. And he said, go get a job in Nordstrom. Go work at Nordstrom. You'll meet people. You'll understand the footwear. He said, it's a paid education. Most people in the footwear industry start there. So I went and met the manager, and just basically, for the most part, I wouldn't say I begged. I basically told him to hire me. I was like, you won't regret this. And went and got a job at Nordstrom, and I just started meeting any and all reps that I possibly could. Because remember, go back to the Zoomies thing. I was like, there's reps. There's people that their job is to service these stores. And so I just started meeting any and all reps. I remember I went to my manager and I said, hey, we do trunk shows and we do special events, and I want to be the guy that reaches out to these reps and sets these up. He said, yeah, sure. Because at this point I was kind of starting to get a little bit of this, like, okay, well, the last time I just reached out and put myself out there, it worked. I'm going to try it again. And so it kind of became my mantra, my mode of operation was just like, put yourself out there. What's the worst that can happen? You're told no. If you're told no, you're just right where you were. And then you try to figure something else out. So I started to put myself out there, and you met reps and stuff. And then one day, one of the reps at Puma was like, hey, I know you've been trying to get a hold of my team, but the guy who's doing all this doesn't work here anymore. He left. And I said, oh, so you're looking for somebody? He said, yeah. And so right there on the spot, I said, I'm your guy. He said, what do you mean? I said, I want that job. He said, but you work at Nordstrom. I said, yeah, I know, but I want that job. I want to do that. So he gave me a chance. We did about 2 months of interviewing. And I remember I interviewed with him and his partner, and I showed up to the interview. It was the Bellevue Athletic Club, and I showed up in a suit and brown shoes, and they just started laughing. And I went, what? And they go, why are you wearing a suit? And I said, well, because I work at Nordstrom. Isn't this what you, like, I wear a suit every day, and is this what you do at job interviews? And they're like, no, this is Puma, man. We're a sports brand. We're a sportswear brand. You don't need to do that. They thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. Ended up getting the job. Ended up thinking I was just going to be a tech rep. I was just going to be this guy who just kind of went around and told people about the shoes. And they said, hey, you guys are 23 years old. He said, you're young, you're energetic. You seem to know what's going on. Like, how would you like to like rep maybe 15 stores in the Northwest? It's like, of course, let's go. And they're like, but you don't have any experience. You sure you can do it? I was like, yeah, I worked at Nordstrom. I learned how to sell. Like, I can sell, no problem. So I did that. And then I started hearing these rumors about the marketing team in Puma wanted some local guys to start doing some activations and product seeding and product launches. And I was at a sales meeting, and they announced it. I walked right up to the director of marketing, and I went, I'm your guy. He's again, what do you mean? I was like, I want to do that job. He's like, yeah, but you're a sales rep. I said, I can do both. Don't worry about it. I can do both. Put myself out there. They let me do both. I had for 4 years at Puma. I was the Northwest sales rep, and I was the entertainment lifestyle marketing coordinator. And during the day, I'd go out and I'd sell shoes and I'd meet people. And then in the evening, I'd set up events and launch parties, and I'd sponsor different nights at places. And I was working with rappers and DJs, and I just started meeting all sorts of people, and I just continued to kind of like put myself out there, and not like in a smarmy salesman type of way around just trying to like finagle my way into things. I created the most genuine and honest, connected relationships that I could with people, and just tried to be as honest and genuine as I could be. And next thing I know, Puma asked if I would move to LA and take over the West Coast, which I would keep in mind. My wife and I had just gotten married, and she was like, absolutely not. We are not leaving Washington. This isn't happening. And I said, do you trust me? She said, well, of course I trust you. I married you. And I said, well, do you believe that God has a plan for us? Do you believe that that we really have the opportunity to trust that he's not going to let us astray? And she said, yeah. And I said, I know this hasn't been the easiest path, because quite honestly, I was a private sales rep working for Puma on a 1099 and taxes, and I was young and didn't understand, and it was rough. But I said, I think this is going to open doors for us. I don't want to live in LA. I've never had a desire, but I don't think this is going to be permanent. I don't think it's going to be for very long. And so we made a little newlywed pact that we would go to LA for a year and kind of see how it goes. And if at the end of the year nothing works out, we'll come home. Like, what do we have to lose? So I went down there, did it, and I just kept meeting people, and it was a pretty grueling experience. LA is a hard place to live. Being 26 years old at the time, it was like we couldn't afford it. We lived in Valencia, which was in the middle of nowhere. I would, don't take your time to Google it. It's literally in the middle of nowhere, northern LA County, and it was rough. But I met a lot of great people, and I kept putting myself out there. And about a year in, Converse called me and said, hey, we've been, we know what you're made of. We people over here that know you, and we want you to come over and start Converse skateboarding. And that was kind of what launched me into product creation. It was kind of this 5 years of just grueling, hard work, 1099, multiple positions, paying my own airlines, no gas reimbursements. It was no corporate card, no phone. It was just everything out of my own pocket. And then, Converse came knocking on my door about a position, and I kind of put myself out there, and it extended that 1 year of living in California to 5 years total living in California. We ended up moving down to Orange County, but that from there, it just kind of took off. And I had an opportunity to start a whole division at Converse, and then they offered me a role to move out to Massachusetts. We went out there with our 2-year-old son, and posted up in Massachusetts for 5 years. Had 2 more kids out there, and just kind of grew my career at Converse, and went from a product line manager to a senior product line manager, and then a director position opened up. And once again, I just put myself out there and just threw everything I could at it. And then, just from knowing people and kind of establishing a bit of a trust with people in the industry and building a little bit of a name for myself. I'm not big on personal brands and all that stuff, but I had built a name for myself and knew a lot of really good people. And then Adidas came knocking on my door, and it gave us an opportunity to move our family now from, was a family of 3 when we moved to Massachusetts, now a family of 5. Had a chance to move out to back home in the Northwest to Portland, Oregon, and worked at Adidas for about 3.5 years, where I was doing all their skate and snow. And then, during the pandemic, had an opportunity to step in and work closely with Pharrell Williams, doing all his product. And I just kind of had a moment of, this conversation you and I had, Richard, I kind of had a moment of like, that was fun. That was a fun 15, 16, 18, whatever years ago. I lost count of how many years it was. Just like, but I don't want to do big brands anymore. I've done it. I've had a great career, and it was about that time that I started, getting this itch to go to a smaller brand and play a bigger part. And I had the opportunity to move to Colorado and take over senior director of product for Crocs. And so they talked to me about it. I put myself out there again. I was like, what do I have to lose? I got a great job already, so I might as well have the conversation. I'm big on having conversations. Clearly it's worked to my advantage. And I did that, and we moved the family to Colorado. And then 9 months into being in Colorado, they acquired Hey Dude shoes, and the brand president, who was someone I put myself out there with in my early days of Converse, and he was the vice president of Chuck Taylor. And we just wanted to learn from him, and I wanted to talk to him, and I wanted to get to know him. And he came and tapped me on the shoulder and was like, you want to come over here and do this? And that's been the last 9 months. So I know it's a long story, and it's probably a little more detailed than need be, but I say it because I guess my overall thought and message to anybody that's, kind of coming up and questioning what their path is like, you got to put yourself out there. That's the name of the game. No one's going to give you handouts, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone that's listening, they've had their own cold storage experience where they're sitting in doing this work, and they know it's paying their bills, but it's not what they want to do. And hopefully we have enough people around us that are willing to speak into our lives and challenge us to just go do something. So, what I think is interesting about that thread of your story is that it wasn't a resume. It wasn't an education. It was personal relationships. It was gumption. It was moxie. It was trust. It was faith. It was all of these things. And really it was paying your dues along the way in a way that you weren't owed something, but that you were going to give something in return. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I didn't, anytime I would talk to somebody and I put myself out there, it was never about trying to sell them a dream or be like, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. It was all about like, I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do what you need of me. And then I'm going to go even further. Cause I think that's a lot of, specifically with the younger generations. It's like, I did this, I checked this box. Now get me what I deserve. And I knew that I didn't deserve anything. I had no degree. I had no previous work experience. Like, why would Nordstrom hire a guy straight out of a frozen foods warehouse? Why would Puma hire some guy who had only been at Nordstrom for 6 months? Why would Converse hire a guy to have him start an entire division and run product who had never worked in product, so on and so forth? That whole build was just, every time I'd get something new, I'd be like, and let me be clear. There's a lot of stuff I did not get. And I think that's the thing that people also need to understand is like, it's not just always success because you've thrown yourself out there. You will get shut down. You will fail. But that every time I did that, my skin got a little thicker. It got a little more leathery, and I got a little bit more grit, because I had been through failure. I had been through rejection. And I think that's what kind of pushed me to like try even harder with certain things. Cause I've had things where like, two that come to mind, just dream jobs where I was like, this is it. And I didn't get them. And I'm fine with that, because also, faith plays a big role in who I am and how I maneuver through life. But I always knew that like God wasn't going to let me down. He was never going to put me in a situation that I couldn't handle. And he was never going to put things in front of me that weren't right for me. And that goes back to that conversation, with my wife. We talk about this all the time. I was like, do you still regret that move to LA? She's like, no, yeah, it was a good move. We made a smart decision. So yeah, I think people just have to like realize that nothing's going to be handed to you, but like you got to go get it. And you got to do it the right way.
So going back to when you were in the frozen food storage job, like, do you feel like during that time your dream died and you thought you're never going to work in shoes again? Or deep down, did you know that like you just needed to climb out of that hole and it would happen? I
think I had a little bit of both. I had definitely peaks and valleys. I had, it's like, God tells us everything is a season. I had seasons where I was just deflated. And I was like, well, who makes the most money in this company? Well, it's the sales guys. So now I got to get out of this warehouse up into that warm loft up there with a desk and get these, big overstuffed Carhartt overalls off, because my health is deteriorating. I got to get up there. So that kind of became a new goal. But then I would find myself kind of going, wait. That's not the goal. Like, that's not the goal. I remember the day that I went in and resigned and told him I was going to Nordstrom. I remember one of the lead sales guys, he had just built a probably 6,000 square foot, just monster house on one of the golf courses in Washington. And he was like, did you see the house that I just built? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, don't you want that? And I was like, I mean, it'd be nice, but it's not the goal. I don't want to work here and be unhappy. I want to go do something I want to do. And he finally just kind of looked at me and was like, all right, go do your thing. And to have his support and have him kind of like dangle that carrot, but have it just not be something I wanted to pursue was pretty impactful for me.
Yeah. And going back to that time, hearing how it was like your roommates that really pushed you to go pursue what you really wanted to, like, that really stuck out to me, showing like how important it is, the people that you're putting yourself around consistently, whether they're encouraging you to chase after what they know, is best for you or not. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely, just on that, I've always tried to surround myself with people that are supportive, and that's not to say that you got to surround yourself with people that always agree with you and always say, yeah, well, if that's what you want to do, go do it. I don't mean it's supportive that way. I mean, it's supportive of, in the fact that they're there to like lift you up, but also be to kind of check you. I think it's good to have people around you that kind of check you. They were not only being supportive at that time, but they were checking me too. They were like, what's wrong with you, man? Like, if you're unhappy, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, no one is stopping you. This is you. So I think it's really good to surround yourself with people that are supportive. Like, I've been around toxic people, and all they want to do is steal your thunder and beat you down, and they want to see you fail. Don't associate with people like that. It's not worth the time.
Yeah,
I pray for them, I really do, but it's not worth the time.
Yeah. And then I also want to ask you, so you keep saying, putting yourself out there, that was like the name of your game to elevate your career. I'd be curious, like, would you say that more often than not, putting yourself out there, you were told yes than no, or was it pretty even?
Say it was like a 55-45. Like pretty even, but I'd say there was a little more no's than there were yeses. And that's also kind of directly proportionate to how much you choose to put yourself out there. If you don't choose to put yourself out there very much, you probably better get used to no's. But I early on in my career, I thought you got to stay here and you got to go, like my dad, 38 years at Boeing, and it's like, you just stay with, because that was the old mentality, is you go with the company, you stay there for life. And, once I started getting better mentors, in my life, which were, by the way, were very few and far between. I didn't have a whole lot of them. There was maybe one or two that were actually worth a darn in any advice they were giving me. But I had a couple that were like, and maybe some weren't the greatest, but the advice that did stick with me was that they put themselves out there and explored every conversation they could. Right. I've talked to brands that I probably really didn't ever really want to work for in the first place, but it was like, hey, I might as well see what they're about. I gotta be honest with you. If we were sitting here 18 months ago and you'd asked me who Hey Dude was, I would have told you I don't know who they are, let alone a brand that I thought I was going to work for. But I had the conversation, and I will say that in the 20 some odd years of doing this is the happiest I've ever been. Right. And it's a brand that I never saw myself working for, but I had the conversation. Right. Like, not just was the role great, but the compensation package was great. Everything fell into place because I frankly explored it, and I didn't need to do that. So I'd say, yeah, it skewed a little heavier towards no's, but that was because later in my career, I started having more conversations. And so I kind of prepared myself, and I kind of mentally was like, okay, this may not work out. I remember I had one conversation. It was a chief product officer for a fishing brand, and it was a location we wanted to live. It was a brand that I really admire, and I shot for the stars. I knew I was way underqualified, but I was like, I'll never know. I'll never know if I don't have this conversation. And it was a no, but I also believe that God puts like challenges in front of you. Like he like, I've never ever had an opportunity presented without another opportunity happening at the exact same time. So at the time that I was having this CPO conversation, the Crocs thing happened. And it was like, what are you going to do? Like, and to be quite honest with you, like, Crocs offered the job first, and I had a decision to make. Do I want to pass this? It's like, hey, a bird in the hand. Do I want to pass this up and see what happens over here? Dude, this is an amazing opportunity. So, it's not like you're just going to have things thrown at you, or God's going to reach down and like point his finger at something and be like, it's this one. You know what I mean? You're going to have to do a little bit of the work yourself, but luckily my faith and my perseverance and my trust has luckily, I've been blessed, and it's definitely worked out.
So with all this being said, I assume you'd consider yourself a sneakerhead.
My son certainly does.
Yeah.
And so do all of his friends that end up coming over here. At 43 years old, I would say I probably wouldn't consider myself a sneakerhead, because I feel like I've kind of grown out of that. But I would certainly say my shoe collection would probably make people think otherwise. I've got, I'd say somewhere in the ballpark, I feel almost embarrassed to say this, I think of somewhere in the ballpark of probably 1,000 to 1,200 pairs of shoes in my basement.
Jeez.
From all the brands I've worked for, some that I've just, been blessed enough to get for free, and some that I've, in my younger days chased down and bought off eBay and stuff. But I'm a little older now, and my son Weston is, praying that he will someday wear a size 11 because, he wants all my shoes. But yeah, I would say I'm an old retired sneakerhead. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So if your house is on fire and you had to save one pair, which pair are you going for?
Oh man. I asked that exact same question to John Hoke, who's the chief product officer for Nike. He used to be the VP of product at Converse, and he was a great guy. I asked him the same question. I can't remember what his answer was, though, oddly enough. But I'd have to say mine would probably be I did in 2018, I believe it was. I flew down to San Francisco and had a 2.5 hour meeting with the Beastie Boys. and designed our design counterpart and I sat down backstage. They were on their book tour, and I got to sit with Ad Rock and Mike D and design a shoe with them. And we only made 500 pairs. We sold them to select skate shops. They were going on eBay from anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 because they were so rare. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's the coolest shoe in the world, but it has kind of the most near and dear story to my heart. I loved their music when I was a kid. And, when I had the chance to kind of like meet them and build a shoe with them, was pretty cool. If it wasn't those, I do have the pair of 2001 black cement Jordan 4s that were the first time they'd retroed the shoe. They're now falling apart, but I'd probably save those two. I know you
That's
said one.
Fun. I want to tour this.
I got two hands. So
this collection.
You can
I do this.
You're welcome to come over and look at them. If you wear anything near a size 11, you're welcome to take some. My wife would appreciate it.
That's great. Well, hey, Ryan, what are some things that people assume about the footwear and apparel business that's wrong? What are some things that people think that just aren't true?
It's actually funny. As you started to say that, I actually almost want to flip the question to answer it. I think there's a lot of things that people don't think about that actually exist. But let me try to answer your question first. I think there's a lot of people historically thought like it's just not anything you can get into, right? Like, how do you do it? I didn't know. But what I would say is a lot of universities and a lot of different educational establishments actually offer a lot of courses to get into this industry now, which is what I would say to people that are listening. Or that are friends or family, people that listen, is the advice I would give is like, look into it. I just hired an associate product manager from University of Colorado who got her master's in product management. There are courses out there. The culture of kind of sneakers and footwear and fashion, much like music, has now started to trickle its way into academia, where you can actually get courses. I mean, there's universities that teach courses on DJing now, kind of that kind of street culture has worked its way into a lot of different worlds. You can think about the world of graffiti is now considered fine art, so there's a lot of things that exist that didn't used to exist. So I would say that's probably the biggest misconception of people is there's no way, you just got to know somebody. Well, yeah, maybe when I was coming up, but now, like, look into it. There are a lot of, two of the biggest would probably be, one of the biggest would be FITM out of Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. Not only can you get, footwear and apparel design degrees, which is kind of more common, but you can actually now learn the trade of merchandising and product management, which product management is my expertise. But I'd say look into that. I'd also say to the flip side of that is like, a little bit of a forewarning to people that are looking into this industry. Like, it's kind of unlike a lot of industries. There is a lot of ego. There's a lot of kind of holier than thou people and people that are very wrapped up in what they're wearing and who they know. And, a lot of times you got to carry a broom and sweep up all the names that people are dropping when you're around them. It can be taxing, and it can be, speaking very candidly, it lacks some selflessness and some humility. And it's not to say that there are people in the community that are very selfless and very humble, but I would say there's a lot of people that you're going to have to deal with egos, and you're going to have to deal with, I know this person and this person got me here. And it's I don't think it was as prevalent when I was younger, but it certainly is now. And there are a lot of people that just want to work for these brands to say they work for the brands for social clout. They boost their Instagram followers or get to know people or get free stuff. Be aware. Like, I would tell people, like, if that's not your thing, then this might not be your industry. And then, there are other apparel and footwear brands where maybe that's not as predominant, but it certainly exists, specifically within some of the bigger brands that are driving a lot of the more hype and things of that nature these days. So that's probably the forewarning I would give people.
So I want to ask about like early on in your career being in sales. Like I feel like a lot of times people tell people my age if they're going into the business world or anything and they don't know what to do. Like I hear a lot of times people say just start in sales and because you'll learn a lot. And if you can sell, you can do a lot. So one, I want to know if you felt like that was true, if you were happy that you started in sales, and two, like how you've seen that benefit you in your career today.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly was true for me. I mean, because that was the exact piece of advice I got. Go get a job working in sales. You'll meet people. You'll learn the business. It's paid education. But what they didn't tell me is I go back to that grit and that sense of like just getting after it. Like you learn that in sales. You know, it's not an easy thing. It's not for the faint of heart, because you are putting yourself out there constantly in a very uncomfortable way. You know, and there's times where it's going to come easy to you, and there's other times you got to really fight for it. But what it did for me is it created perseverance, and it taught me what it was like to actually catch a loss, because in sales you're going to catch a lot of losses and you're going to be turned down a lot, and again it creates that grit, it creates that leather skin. So I'm happy that I did it. I don't regret it for 1 second. I would highly encourage anybody that if they're just kind of don't really know, like give it a shot. You'll know pretty quick whether you got it or not. You know, because it's one of those things. And I always say this, even within product creation, is like, you know, I can teach you the systems. I can teach you how to run some retail math. I can teach you how to build a line plan, but I can't teach you taste. I can't teach you quality. You either have it or you don't. And that's the same thing with sales. So I certainly would say, like, you know, for people that are questioning it, yeah, there's a lot of success to be had in sales. It's been a starting block for a lot of people that I know. And where I think it comes in handy later on down the road, again, talking about that, you know, getting used to being to failing or being told no, and building that grit, but also just the perseverance that it teaches you growing up, and then how it actually can translate into other aspects of the business. So for instance, for me and my team, you know, we manage the whole product management process. So we're not only taking into account, you know, what's happening with consumers and trend, but we're also keeping into account what's happening with retailers. So now all of a sudden you're having a ton of conversations with sales. And if you know how to speak their language, you can better interpret the insights they're giving you and turn those into business opportunities. So I think that's where I've been able to leverage my sales experience the most.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool to hear.
There's people out there right now that they've got their dream job with a dream company with in a dream industry, but they're in their own cold storage freezer and they're not for sure what to do. So you've already given us plenty of thoughts around this, but just speak to that person right now, directly to them. They're sitting in their own version of the cold storage, but they've got this dream that they want to pursue. What advice do you give them?
My advice would be take a good, hard internal inventory on what is important to you. Really look deep as to what's important to you. And I say that because one of my best friends said this to me a few years ago. So I was really torn. I really didn't know where I wanted to go next in my career. I was very unhappy with the company I was at. I felt like there was not a lot of opportunities. Kind of all the conversations had run cold. I've put myself out there multiple times, specifically to one company in general, which I kind of put on a pedestal. Like, I got to work for this company. And I don't think I need to say the name, because most everybody in footwear wants to work for this company because they're the biggest, they're the best, they have the best athletes. And I put myself out there so many times, just got shot down one after another. And I remember looking at my wife and being like, what's the point? This isn't working out. And I was talking to my friend and I was like, I don't know what to do, man. And he said, you got to take a good, hard internal inventory of what's important to you. Like, are you more concerned with working for somebody and saying you work for them, or are you more concerned with the wealth and the well-being and the happiness of your family? Like, what is it? Because you have to make that decision at some point in your career. You have to make that decision. In very rare circumstances do you hear of somebody that it was a breeze the whole time. They never had to make hard decisions. They never had to choose career or family. It's just not reality. You're gonna have to make that decision someday. And I've had to do it. And so that's what I would say to them is like, you may be in that freezer and you may be making good money. I made good money. The money wasn't the problem. It was my happiness. My relationship with my wife at the time was not good because I was unhappy. And even at the time that I was there, I was making more money than anybody my age, but that didn't, it's like they say, money can't buy you happiness. So I'd say like take a good internal inventory on what's important to you and do a little bit of that risk versus reward, pros versus cons. And then you got to make a decision. Right. And I'd say, for people of faith, like put your trust in God because he's not going to lead you astray. He's not going to make it the easiest and there's going to be bumps in the road, but that's what I had to do. And I think that's what a lot of people have to do. And I think saying it is one of those things where people are like, oh yeah, it's a lot easier said than done. Like it worked out for you. Yeah, it doesn't work out for everybody, but you got to take those calculated risks. I see people that just have jumped blindly into things and it has not worked out. Like really do the work internally, pray about it, talk to loved ones about it, and then decide what's most important for you. Is it the money? Is it the location? Is it the social clout? Is it being able to say that you do what you do? Or is it the well-being of your family? My prayer would be that people would be blessed and they get both, but that doesn't always happen. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? That's just kind of me. What's coming off which is what I think about all the time.
Yeah, definitely. When we were first like brainstorming up for this whole podcast at the very beginning, that was one of the big topics that we realized that a lot of young people need to talk about more is establishing their priorities, just in life in general, not just in their career, because it's very easy to just think all about what's next in terms of the next couple of years. And so asking those internal questions of what really is most important to you. Yeah. I think that's really, really good. So,
yeah, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is this, we live in a time where, I mean, this has been said 1,000 times or more, where everything is now. Like the faster you can get it, the better. The instant gratification and younger generations. No disrespect, Christian, because I don't think you're one of them. But a lot of these younger generations, these kids that are growing up, are like, I want this. I want it now. I got this degree. Give it to me now. Give me the big paycheck now. And some corporations are doing it. I mean, tech's doing it. But there's a lot of industries that aren't doing it. They're not just like, oh yes, yeah, we'll pay you that money. No problem. You still got to fight for it. And you still got to show that you can do it. And I personally believe that if a company's not doing that, they're doing a disservice to the individual, because just giving somebody something because they want it and they think they deserve it does not create character. It creates brats. And there's a lot of that in this industry right now. There's a lot of kind of, young up and comers that just have like, I know so-and-so, or I did this earlier on, so you need to like give me everything that I want. And it's the people that are really putting their nose to the grindstone that like, they're the ones that are succeeding. They're the ones that are becoming the future leaders because they've got that grit that I talked about. So I think there needs to be some humility. I think for people that are going into this that are young, my advice was like, go in humble, right? Like confidence. There's a thin line between confidence and cocky, and you got to make sure you're on the right side of it, because a lot of employers these days, you cross that threshold into cocky and they're like, I could care less where you got a degree from. I could care less who you know. I don't want that in my company. We talk about it right now at Hey Dude, because Crocs acquired the brand in January, and we've been building an entirely new structure and opening up a lot of jobs. And one of the things that our brand president talks a lot about is like, leave your ego at the door. We're not hiring egos. We want to know what you can do. We want to know that you're willing to roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty. That's what we want. And I think that is a quality that is slowly dying, and a lot of people are trying to bring it back.
Yeah, well, this has been an awesome interview. We want to kind of end with our 3 Think Wise questions, is what we're calling them. So Right off the bat, number 1, tell us something that you do or a way that you think that is totally different from most people, and how has it served you well?
I think it goes back to, I was talking about how I'm the sum of all these influential parts of my life. Is I've always tried to like zig when others zag. I've always tried to think a little bit more outside the box, and again, take calculated risk, but be like, what can I do that's different than everybody else? What is it that I can provide that's different than everybody else? How can I be the best that they've ever seen without being, again, crossing that line into being cocky? So I'm not sure a lot of people think that way. I think a lot of people just are only say, I am the best, so hire me. So I'd say that was one of my things. The other thing too is like, I've always put my trust in God, and I don't know that certainly this day and age, a lot of people do that. So I'd say that that's something that I have put a lot of emphasis on in my life is walking with faith and trust.
That's good. Yeah, we believe that it's not necessarily what you do, but how you think that sets you up for success, and all of that's good. So speaking of think wise, the next question is about wisdom.
Yeah.
What's a tidbit of wisdom someone's given you over the years that served you well?
Yeah, this is actually one of the questions I read in advance. I was like, I got to think about this because I've had so many amazing pieces of advice, but I've also had so many bad pieces of advice, and I've followed some of those bad ones, and it's not worked out well for me. But I think two things that came to mind. One is now I'm drawing a blank on what they are. I spent all night. So this is why I try to not read the questions too much in advance. But I think one great piece of advice I got was find your own voice. Figure out who you want to be, because you don't need to be everybody else, right? Specifically in my career, I do a lot of presenting in front of big crowds. I'm in a leadership role. And what I've looked to do is try to adopt the good things that I see in leaders that I trust and remove the bad things, but always do it through my own voice and through my own lens, right? Like I really like how this leader always praised publicly. I'm going to do that. I really didn't like how this one leader would kind of slam people publicly. I'm not going to do that. But it's not that I'm going to go praise the same way this person does, or I'm not going to go present the same way this person does. When you start to carve out your own voice and become your own person, people will see that. They'll see that you're an individual. They'll see that you bring something to the table that's unlike anything else. The second piece of advice I got, which I think is really important for this day and age, is don't always aspire to get the credit for everything. I think everybody right now wants the credit. I did this. I did that. Oh, that was my idea. It's a team. I can't stand it when people say I. That's one of the things I say on my team is if I hear somebody say I, I'll pull them aside a little bit. I'm like, hey, it wasn't an I situation. That was a we situation. We're a team. So even in times where I've been very proud of things that my team has done, I always try to like praise the team and be like, this was us. Because when you remove the desire to get the credit, you feel free, right? Like you feel a sense of, I'm a part of something that's more than me. That's more than, it's not because it's not about me. It's about everybody that comes with me on this ride. It's that whole idea of like all ships rise with the tide. It's not just one ship. So I'd say those are the two biggest pieces of advice that I've tried to build my career around.
Those are great. So our last question, we're all about taking action and not just talking about cool ideas the whole time. And so whether it's specific to like the footwear industry or not, or if it's just someone who's really wanting to follow a very specific passion they have, what would be the one thing that you would tell someone, a young person, to do after they're done listening to this today?
I would challenge any young person that listens today is go out, and I'd say like not, you don't have to do it right away, but like in the next week, put yourself in a situation you're uncomfortable with. Challenge yourself. See how you can react. To give another quick story, I was, I think I told you this, Richard, but I was out on a 1-year non-compete when I left Converse to go to Adidas. Nike was like, nope, you sign a non-compete, you're out for a year. And I all of a sudden had 12 months to just do whatever. The beauty part about it is I got to spend a lot of time with my family and take them to school and do things that I otherwise didn't to do. I didn't travel very much, but I thought, wow, what an amazing opportunity to put myself in uncomfortable situations. And so I kind of had this challenge to myself of like, I'm going to do things that scare me. And I don't mean like jump out of an airplane with a, parachute. It wasn't things like that. It was like, I've always wanted to train in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I've always been terrified that I'm going to get hurt. So I immediately, the minute I felt scared, I was like, I went and signed up for jiu-jitsu and I started training in jiu-jitsu. I've always wanted to cycle, but I was always terrified I was going to get hit by a car, which I think is probably a pretty, valid concern. But, I went and got a gravel bike and I went and started riding and stuff. And you'll learn what you love and what you don't. And there were certain things I challenged myself on that I walked away from. And there were certain things I kept stuck with, but I was like, wow, I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was. I'm like, God hasn't built us to be weak individuals. He's built us to be warriors and soldiers and specifically as men to like provide for our families. So whether you're a male or a female or a kid or an adult, if you're listening to this, like sometime this week, go put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, something that scares you, be cautious, like don't do something stupid, but like put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, see what happens. Chances are you're going to come out of it feeling 10 times better than when you went in. You're going to realize your potential. And I think that's the big thing that I, as a 43-year-old man now, who's not this young buck anymore, now is more, these calculated risks are also about like putting myself in uncomfortable situations to see what happens. I don't know. It's just
That's great, Ryan. We appreciate all of your insight. You've journeyed a long way in a short distance. So the career in the industry has been in the same thing, but you've journeyed a long way in it. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being a contributor to this world. Thank you for being a man who knows what success looks like and is going after it. We're all better for it. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. If anything I'm saying is inspirational, that's awesome. But for me, I want to raise good kids. I want us all to raise good, faith-filled, contributing, loving, caring adults. And, I want people I really pray that people go out there and do good in the world. And if that means, again, putting yourself out there and kind of going against the grain, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Thanks again, Ryan.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.